Hey, what's up? This is Jordan Harris, the Mediocre Millionaire. Welcome back to the channel. So today's video, we're going to be going over my story on how I went from being broke and unemployed to millionaire in about 5 years or so. Stay tuned.
What I want out here, yeah.
Alright, so my entrepreneurship journey started in 2015. My wife and I found ourselves both unemployed. We both had college degrees and we had no money saved up and we had very little money in our checking accounts. But I want to take you back to 2010 actually. That's when I actually earned my business degree and I started applying for different jobs. I'm trying to, utilize this college degree that I had just earned. I ended up getting a job at an airplane manufacturing plant, overseeing all of the janitorial staff there. So it's about 105 employees or so that I oversaw every day. Things were going pretty well. I worked there for about 3 years or so until my boss and I just stopped seeing eye to eye on different things. Actually, the day before I had my first child, my first daughter, I got fired from my job. So I was in the hospital. Everybody's congratulating me for the birth of my first child, and I'm sitting in the hospital thinking like, y'all have no idea. I just got fired. I don't know how I'm paying for any of this. So that was a pretty big hit, obviously. I'm supposed to be celebrating the birth of my first child, but I'm sitting in the hospital trying to figure out how I'm going to make ends meet because I had no money saved up. After that, my wife and I, we were living on unemployment checks, living on WIC checks, trying to figure things out. I ended up starting a nonprofit organization where I was mentoring youth in the area. I did that for about 6 or 7 months or so. There's not a whole lot of money in nonprofits. I ended up having someone reach out to me who was the regional manager at the company I had gotten fired from. He ended up leaving that previous company that we worked for, and he started managing a different company. So he said, "Hey Jordan, I know things didn't end well at the previous company. Why don't you come work with me over here? Because things are beautiful on this side." So I guess I was pretty desperate and everything. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and give it a shot. So I was hired on to oversee all of the marketing for the company. So they didn't have a website. They didn't really have a Facebook presence. So I was brought on to help them get their Facebook page going. I was also brought on to do like some Facebook marketing and also speak to people about getting their website up to date. I did that for, I want to say 2 months or so. Things were going all right. The owner of the company was pretty intense, I guess is a good way to say it. He would always walk into the office and say things like, "Ah, Jordan, you think you're so smart. I need to see you sweat. I need to see you get out there in one of those machines, work one of those all night. I need to see you sweat." So, I'm thinking, well, I wasn't brought on here to be overseeing the staff all night. That wasn't my job description. My job description is to help get the marketing up and going as it should be. So one day I was working late. The owner of the company made sure that we all started our day around 6:30 and we could not go home until 6. Didn't matter what we were doing. We had to stay about 12 hours or there was going to be an issue. So I ended up staying till 6, obviously, as I always did. And I went to the back of the building one day. I don't even know what I was going back there for, honestly, but I went to the back of the building and I heard the owner talking to one of the maintenance guys who happened to be one of his close friends. And he was calling me every MFer you could think of. He was saying that MFer thinks he's so smart. He's always sitting up there and wearing those glasses thinking whe's so smart. At that time, I wore glasses. Now I have LASIK surgery, so I don't need glasses. But I heard him talking crazy about me, so I ended up leaving. Got my stuff, left, got in the car, and I called the person who had brought me to this company. And I said, I was pretty livid, so I was screaming and telling him like, man, this is not going to work because the owner of the company is just not going. He's not going to let me make it. So I walked in one day. I was sitting on the computer. And my guy comes into the office and he's like, "Jordan, the owner, man, he doesn't like you wearing those headphones, because I was sitting doing computer work with my headphones on. She was like, Jordan, the owner does not like you with those headphones on, man. You gotta take the headphones off. And after hearing what he was saying about me in the back room and all that constant nagging about wanting to see me sweat and all that, I said, what is today's date? That was my question to him. What's today's date? And he looked at his phone or his watch, whatever it may have been, and he told me. And I said, okay, well, 2 weeks from today is my last day. And he looked like he had just seen a ghost, but I had it. I was so tired of dealing with him and so tired of dealing with everybody telling me what to do, where to be, when to leave, how to do everything. I had it. I was done. So I think I ended up lasting there for maybe 6 months or so. So I'm headed home. I called my wife and I'm like, yo, I just quit. I'm done. So she understood all the issues that I was going through at that job, so she was pretty happy for me, actually. She didn't respond as most people's wives probably would. She was pretty happy for me. So I was, sitting at home trying to figure out what I was going to do next. And I was like, janitorial industry is not what I love, but it is what I know. So, I had been fresh out of college overseeing that, 105 employees doing janitorial work, getting fired for that job, ended up getting a new job at a company that was also janitorial work. So that was the one industry that I knew. So I was like, I do have a college degree. There's not a lot of people in the janitorial industry that have college degrees. So I figured I could use that to get contracts if I started my own janitorial service. So I figured I'd take some time to plan. It took about 3 weeks or so just planning some things on what the name would be, what my strategy would be and all that stuff, which was the wrong idea. I should have just jumped into action, but I took all this time to plan. And about 2 weeks later, my wife called on her way home from work, and she was like, you never guess what just happened. I'm like, what's that? She said, I just got fired. So she and I were both unemployed. We had a new infant at the house, no money. Then I was like, okay, no more planning. Let's just figure this thing out. We were on unemployment. We were getting unemployment checks. We were living on the WIC checks. We were just trying to figure some things out. So I ended up saving $45, which sounds weird to some people that I had to save up $45, but I did. We were that broke. So I saved up $45 and I went and bought a vacuum cleaner from Walmart. It was a Dirt Devil vacuum cleaner. The simplest thing you could find in there. I started knocking on people's doors. I got into my little Nissan Altima, started driving around, knocking on different businesses' doors, telling them that I needed to clean their building. I wasn't saying, can I? I was saying, I need to clean your building. Eventually, one group said, yeah, sure, we'll give you an opportunity. So I cleaned that building every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I got paid $667 every month to do that account. I did that account extremely well. Like, it would take the normal person probably 2 hours to do it, but I was staying 3.5, or 4 hours cleaning that each night because I needed to make sure that it was perfect. I did that, like I said, for a couple of months, made sure that they were happy with everything that I was doing, and then I asked them for a reference. So I was like, would you mind typing up something just saying that our company, we have outstanding service and we're able to save people money and all that? And she did. So she typed up a nice reference sheet for me. I took that letter of recommendation to different companies, because it's important to build your credibility up, because people aren't going to give you an opportunity if you're brand new most of the time. So I took this sheet to everybody and I'm like, look, we actually have done work before. We've done really good work. This group is happy with what we're doing. Why don't you go ahead and give us a shot? So we ended up getting another account and another account and another account. So before I knew it, we were doing pretty decent. I think we were at maybe 5 or 6 accounts, and I was making somewhere around, I don't know, $25,000 to $30,000 a year. So I actually had my head above water at least. I could actually pay our bills, which was beautiful. So around this time, I was talking to my wife. I'm like, you grew up in a daycare center. You have all this experience. You've worked for daycare centers since I've known you. I was like, why don't you go ahead and get the idea, or at least start getting that thought process of starting your own? Would you ever consider doing that? She's like, I don't know. So, we went back and forth on that idea, and eventually she did start a home daycare center. So We named it, or I guess she named it Angel Wings, which actually I'm wearing this shirt today. She named the home daycare Angel Wings. We were allowed to have 8 kids in the daycare, so that's pretty much what she had at all times, was about 8 kids or so, which included our own child. So that ended up paying pretty well. She seemed to really like being her own boss, and it was going pretty well for her at that time. So, I was trying to make things happen with the janitorial industry, with the janitorial business, I should say. We had a basement, so I was in the basement on the computer doing all kind of marketing and making phone calls and everything, trying to grow our janitorial service in the basement. And she had her kids at the daycare upstairs banging around, making all kind of noise. So one day I'm in the basement and I get a phone call, random phone call, and there was a guy that said, "Hey Jordan, do you guys clean floors?" And at the time we did not. I was the only employee. And I did not know how to clean, strip, and wax floors. I didn't know how to do any of that. But I knew that was an opportunity. So my thought process was, if you're paying, I'll figure out how to do it. So my answer, without even hesitating, I was like, yeah, we do. So he ended up giving us this opportunity, saying that he wanted us to give a proposal to strip and wax the floors in all 10 of their facilities across Kansas. And I could not believe that. So I was like, all right, so I ended up making a whole bunch of phone calls, asking people how to do the process, what type of machines I would need. Ended up finding out how much the machines would cost, how much the chemicals would cost, all of that information, and just did a bunch of research on YouTube and figured it all out. So I submitted a quote to them for about, I think it was maybe $18,000. I don't remember how much it was, but I think it was about $16,000 the quote was. And he looked it over and he was like, yeah, that looks good. When can you guys start? I could not believe he was giving us that opportunity. So we ended up doing that job extremely well, actually. I ended up hiring a couple of cousins. I bought some machines, and we made $16,000 in 2 months. So I made $16,000. Those 2 months was more than I had made probably the previous 8 to 10 months altogether. It was pretty crazy. So that contract, we did that so well, and they were so impressed with the work that we had done that they offered us to clean, just to perform the janitorial services for all 10 of their locations year round. So that ended up, I was doing the numbers and everything, and the quote that I gave them ended up being about $200,000 a year, somewhere in there. And at that point, I was like, okay, I've got a few accounts that I have up and going, 6 or 7 accounts. These 10 accounts will give me, 15, 16, or 7 accounts. I was a little worried about being able to oversee all of those by myself, so I asked my brother, practically begged my brother, to leave his job, his management job at an airplane manufacturing company. I was like, man, would you leave your company and come partner up with me? We can co-own this business, and we can probably make some things happen. And I need your help just overseeing all the operations. And eventually he was like, yeah, I'll do it. So he took a pretty big pay cut to come partner up with me, which was a beautiful thing. So that was, at that point, after we got that account, because they ended up accepting that bid, after we got that account, we were making somewhere in the range of $300,000 or so every year, which was a huge turnaround from, a year or 2 years before that. And things were going really well. I spoke to my wife, and we were trying to figure out what we were going to do at the daycare center because it was going really well. So I was like, why don't we consider opening up a daycare, an actual daycare facility instead of just being in a home? And she was like, I don't know about all that. But, we talked about it, and I kind of could see her starting to think that she possibly could make that happen. And even though her mind was starting to wrap around that idea, we never did actually get those steps forward to make that come to fruition. So one day, it was voting time. We were supposed to be doing some preliminary votings for whatever. I don't know what the race was, but we were supposed to be going to vote for some political race. And my wife's mom came over, and she was like, why don't you guys, I'll watch the kids at the home daycare, and you guys go vote. So my wife and I went to vote. We went to a church nearby to vote. And we were walking through there, and I'm like, this place looks like it's set up for daycare. Like right now, all the walls were brightly painted. It was a beautiful facility, so I was like, we should go in there and talk to see if maybe somebody would be interested in renting this space out to us. And my wife was pregnant with our second child. She was like, nah, I'm not gonna go in there. She was big and pregnant, and she figured she didn't look right. But ended up talking her into that. So we ended up going into the church office and asking around, like, hey, would y'all be interested in maybe leasing this space out if we were to do a daycare center? And the guy was like, actually, yeah, I'll walk here right now. So long story short on that part, we ended up signing a lease with that church. And we started about a year later or so. So my wife had 8 children in her home daycare. My brother's wife, she had a daycare as well. And I think she had 3 or 4 kids in her daycare center. So we just ended up merging those 2 daycares together and put it into this daycare center and into this church. So we started at the daycare center with 18 kids, and then it grew pretty quickly in just a couple months to about 60 kids or so. And we got all the money and everything to get the daycare up and going from our janitorial service. So we took money out of the janitorial service, put it into this daycare facility, and ended up growing to about 60 kids at that point. So the daycare is going well. Janitorial industry is going really well for us. Up until my brother and I, we were managing that 10 building account. We had done that for 2 years, and the bid, it was coming to an end. We signed a 2-year contract, and they told us, hey, the 2-year contract is up. We're going out to bid, so you guys have to rebid the contract. And we ended up losing that bid. So that was a huge hit for us to lose that much money all of a sudden like that. That was December 2019, I believe it was. So we lost about half of our revenue, which meant that we both had to take huge pay cuts. It was a pretty scary time for us. So thankfully, our daycare was going really well. And the next month, even though, I'm not going to lie to you, we were pretty shook about everything that was going on, losing that big account. So the next month, we ended up, we lost about $200,000 or $300,000 here. But then the next month, we ended up getting an account that paid us even more than that. It was working for our county, doing about, I think it was 6 different buildings for the county. They ended up signing us to do that contract. So we lost $300,000 here, but we ended up getting about $350,000 here to replace that. And then, of course, COVID hits. So COVID hurts almost every company that was up and going at that point, except the janitorial industry. That was the one thing that people wanted, was to clean more. So while we signed a contract for, let's say, $350,000, almost every account that we had with the county doubled because they needed us to come in and do disinfecting as well. So where we signed a $350,000 contract, ended up jumping up to about $650,000 a year. So we lose the 10 account contract, and then we ended up doubling that a month later. So that was a huge blessing for us. At this point, the daycare center, we went from, like I said, 18 to about 60, and then all of a sudden it jumped up to 134 kids. So both companies were thriving and going really, really, really well. That was about, I guess I would say March 2020 or so, when everything jumped off and started going so extremely well for us. At that point, we were getting in more money than we needed. So I was looking around and I was telling my brother, like, why don't we start thinking about investing a little bit? I was doing some research online for about a year or so, and I was really interested in flirting with the real estate industry quite a bit. So I was like, why don't we take some of this excess money that we have and just start buying houses with it and just having people rent those houses out from us, and we can just get mailbox money for the rest of our lives on these properties. And that's exactly what we did. We started buying properties. And, my daycare center, we had been at capacity for about a year and a half or so at about 130 kids. That's the most that the state would allow us to have at that facility. So we started going around and looking for other facilities to rent from. And, I'm talking to different churches and seeing if maybe we could figure out a way to rent more space from this church or that church And one of the guys, one of the pastors at one of the churches I was speaking to, he's like, you know, this church, I'll sell it to you for $500,000 if you ever consider buying a church instead of just renting it, you know. He said it's valued at $1 million. If you look online, it's been, you know, it's valued at about $1 million. I'll sell it to you for half that, so you'll have some instant equity once you get into it. So I had never really thought about purchasing a facility for the daycare center. I always thought about renting space from a church because we were a faith-based daycare facility. So it only made sense to operate inside of a church. So we always rented space from a church. So when he put that bug in my ear, I'm thinking, you know, that wouldn't be a bad idea. Maybe we should consider buying something. You know, if not this church, maybe a different one. So I'm going home from there, and I ended up passing a church that was going up for auction, and it was right down the street from our house. So I was like, you know, that might be a good idea. It might not be a bad idea to consider buying that one. It would need some work and everything, but it would definitely give us space to, you know, have more than 134 kids. So my wife and I, we were trying to figure out what's the best going rate for buildings. We had no idea what we were doing as far as commercial buildings go. So we reached out to different commercial real estate agents, and we were just asking, what do you think that building should go for? And nobody could give us a really good answer because there was quite a bit of work that needed to be done to the building. And it's hard to value churches for whatever reason. So my wife and I, we were thinking, and we were just like, okay, why don't we do this? If this church is for us, you know, we'll just put in an offer that we figure is fair, something that we can pay. And it's most likely going to be a lowball offer, but if it's for us, then God will give it to us. So we ended up putting an offer in for about $300,000. That was less than half of what the county had it appraised for, right at $300,000. So put that bid in, and before we knew it, we ended up getting contacted saying, yeah, we're going with your bid. We want you to buy this building from us. It was a sealed bid, which I had never heard of before. You just send in your best offer, and they decide which one. You send in your best offer, and you also tell them what you plan on using the church for. So we did that, and they ended up going with our offer, which was crazy. I'm going to be posting some videos, actually, of this church because we're getting about $180,000 worth of renovations done to it. So you can see the progress on that renovation. So that pretty much brings us to where we are today. We operate Angel Wings Learning Center, which is the shirt that I'm wearing right now, the Daycare Center, Learning Center. We also have Harris Dream Clean. That's the name of our janitorial service. We have about 100 employees all together now. And then we also do a little bit of residential and some commercial real estate as well. So as you can see, we've had a pretty crazy journey over about 5 or 6 years. In 2015, we went from being unemployed, broke, no money saved, no prospects. And about 6 years later, we own property. We own $1 million companies, multiple $1 million companies. And we have about 100 employees or so that work for us. So it's been a huge blessing, a crazy whirlwind, but I'm extremely blessed and happy to be where we are right now. I love to tell this story, and it's not because I like to brag, it's not my thing, but the reason why I like to tell this story is because I'm really big on inspiring people and just sharing stories about simple people like myself. One of the things that my mom always told me when I was growing up, she would always say, give God something to work with. So that means don't just pray and sit in your house and hope that $1 million falls in your lap. You know, if you're considering starting a business, give God something to work with, even if it is just something as simple as going and buying a $45 vacuum cleaner. You know, I got something started. I did something, you know, I started with a $45 vacuum cleaner. Before you know it, we had 60 plus employees working for Dream Clean. And, you know, started a daycare center at our house. And before you know it, we had 40-something employees working for us at the daycare center. So we started something small. We gave God something to work with. And before you know it, He blew it up into this wonderful thing that we have today. And we're able to bless so many other people with the blessings that we have, which is a beautiful thing. So that's pretty much all that I have for you today. Thank you for taking time to listen to this long, drawn-out story. I appreciate your time. Go ahead and like and subscribe to the channel while you're here, because we're going to be giving a lot of free information that I'm sure will help you in your life and your business as well. So take care until next time. God bless. Peace.
What I want out here, yeah.
all the time.